republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. There he is. Okay. Must have been. We'll start with the roll call of members present. Michael Croto, Chair.
Jared O'Connell, Vice Chair.
Russell Blanchett, member.
Lisa Riley, member.
Kevin Lynch, Selectmen's Rep.
Jesse No, alternate.
Travis Tucker, member.
Okay. And Jesse is our newest member. Welcome. Welcome aboard as an alternate for the planning board tonight. With us this evening also is Jay Minkara, our circuit rider, planning board, NRPC. And of course, we have Joan McKibben, who is our planning board administrator. We Jeremy's not here this evening. So if we decide to vote on anything, I guess, Jesse, would you be interested in being in a voting member to fill in for Jeremy's?
I can, yes.
Okay, great, as an alternate. So we'll do that. First item is public input on non-agenda items, items not on the agenda for this evening. Members of the public that have anything they want to add on non-agenda items tonight. Okay, and hearing none, I will close public input on non-agenda items. This is actually a work session this evening. We really don't, there's no specific agenda, but we will be discussing zoning amendments and things of that nature in this session tonight. So I'm going to have Jay sort of lead us off, and we can start there.
I think I saw there's a few items that we have talked about, and that obviously we could talk more about. Probably the most significant ones were the possibility of allowing what we're calling the mixed-use village option in the northern commercial zone. So that is something we looked at before. And certainly we can talk about that again. I think that there seemed to be a sense that this might be something that we want to entertain this year. So just as kind of a reminder, typically not even typically, always, we have our first public hearings, which will be the second week of January, and then the fourth week of January. That's the first public hearing. The second public hearing will be the fourth week of January. So typically, we vote in December what to send to public hearing. So we do have some time. We've got a couple of planning board meetings to discuss. We can have more workshops. I also suggested that there were a couple of things that we should address just because of statutory changes. One of them is really mundane. The definition of a butter changed. So we should change that in our zoning ordinance. We should change that in our regulations as well. And so there's, of course, other options that we can look at. I think there were some things we talked about that might be a little big to bite off, some of the things that came out of the Economic Development Committee. And then separate from zoning, we had also talked about looking at the stormwater regulations. So I've got some stuff that I've worked on, and I thought, when we get there, if we get there, we could hand those out and have some conversation around that. Obviously, the other big item that has been discussed is the possibility of creating a historic district, and I think that's why everybody who's in the audience right now is in the audience, so that might be a good place to start.
Right. I would agree. We do have members here of the Heritage Commission, the Historic Society. Welcome this evening. Appreciate you coming in. So I know that we discussed last time looking at possibility at a zoning change to include a historic district in town. And I know that you folks came up with a draft. You had something that you had put together. And I know the board had questions regarding that. And so, we can start off the discussion tonight. If you guys want to come to the table or talk to us, you're welcome to do that. Or you
The
can
mic's there, that's why.
you can sit there, whatever you want to do. I mean, it's pretty informal tonight.
It is better for the audience at home if,
So I guess it might be helpful.
Yeah.
If you're gonna speak, I guess, to,
yeah, please approach a microphone and be heard. Let the folks at home know what you have to say.
So I'll represent the Historical Society, Marion can represent the Heritage Commission. Anyone else wish to join in? Get it? What's that?
so just, what I would do is just introduce yourselves and, maybe state your name and address for the record.
Marion Colby, 318 Charles Bancroft Highway. I'm the chairman of the Heritage Commission.
Stephen Callaway, 168 Charles Bancroft, the president of the Historical Society.
Joe Stapleton, 21 Mark Lane. I'm a member of the Historical Society and on the commission that the committee that
Committee.
was started to investigate doing this zoning change.
Thank you. Welcome. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about?
Well, first thing, I did give copies the last time, and one of the things that I still have them, but if somebody doesn't, I can get some. I did take that, I removed that word there about generally. Get a copy, please. Thank you. Thank you. Jay, I think you're all up to date on this.
I think so.
Did you want a copy? Don? I have a copy.
Offer to the other members, I think, first.
Everybody up to date?
We have it from last time, yeah.
Then I'll take one, sure.
And that word that you had was concerned about, that the historic generally encompasses, I took that word out. Thank you. And also, this is updated with the current version as a date on the plan.
I know that, in putting this together, your plan, I believe, was, it was gonna be on 3A. Is that my understanding? And can you give a little input on, where it's gonna start and where do you propose that it ends, I guess, is the,
Our proposal is that it will start at Page Road
okay.
and it will end at approximately Robin Ave. And the reason for those two designations is that to the south of Page Road is commercially zoned, and to the north of Robin Ave is commercially zoned.
And I know that, do we have have you put together, what do you call it, like an inventory or a list of homes in Litchfield that would have potential?
There was an inventory done, Jay, 1987?
Sounds about right. It was in the 80s for
Regional
sure.
Planning Commission,
Okay.
and it encompasses this whole area.
National Regional Planning did that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you have a copy of that, Jay?
I have a copy in the office.
You have one?
I gave Kim Queen a copy, and I don't know who else.
If you can make some up so everybody can see it, okay?
It's quite a thick,
I'm used to thick stuff. Code books.
it's a lot of paper.
Electronically sent it
We don't have electronic, we didn't have electronic copy.
back in the day.
In terms of the houses, I mean, I know, what are we looking at in terms of, is it like 50 years old, 60 years old? How
Well,
old?
a historic district, Mike, encompasses all the houses within that district,
Okay.
because there are lots of different types of houses that are, a great addition to a historic district, mid-century homes. They're getting on to nearly 75 years old now. And even modern homes. It's just the district itself. And there are no restrictions as to what someone can build in this area on their own land. And the purpose of the district really is to just prevent any further demolition of historic homes in the town of Litchfield, because we've lost 2 significant homes in the last 2 years. And we've lost several more over the last dozen years.
Again, just as a reminder, though, this only encompasses the area fronting on 3A between Page and Robin, so somebody further away from that area would not be encumbered by this
Right,
at all.
and it's generally just an acre deep, because that's where the old structures are, along the main road.
Yeah.
They're not further into the properties.
And this was brought about because of the response that we received from the folks in town, saying that they liked this area to maintain its quality of life
In the survey that was
in
done.
the survey. And so we're responding to what
And
the
also the
townspeople asked
response
for.
to the demolition of the house at Dark Hall Farm and the demolition of the Bixby house at Wilson Farm.
Okay.
I have some questions on that note.
Yeah.
Take, for instance, the Wilson Farm house that was to be repaired after the fire would have been costly. Would it totally need to be rewired and several other things. So where is the relief for the land, the homeowner?
Well, they were insured, Joe. That could have been repaired. They didn't want to repair it because they said they were no longer in the rental business. That's why they demolished the little, what we call the Snetzinger house that was on their property. They took down the corn crib that was on the property, which was the only one left in the town. And, you know, they're in the process of letting the little barn at the south end of town fall into a state of disrepair.
The little red one?
Yeah, and the same thing at the old Goslin farm. There's nothing being done to maintain that barn.
All right, now go up to Corning Farm,
Yeah.
where that house had vinyl siding on the outside. It was, I mean, you went in the inside. It
Yeah.
needed extensive repair upstairs. The ceilings weren't the right height. Not much left historically, maybe some wide wood floors. And the fireplace chimney, the chimney was just held up by wood from right here. I mean, where is the relief, and it had lead paint. Where is the relief for the landowner or homeowner?
Well, that was deemed a structurally sound building. The fire department went through it. The fireplace was not held up by wood. It was a great stone base under it in the basement. You know, Mr. Morrow was trying to make that seem as a decrepit structure, and it was not. You know, there were
Well,
two
to make-
families living in there
well,
at the
to
time
make
it was
it-
sold.
Habitable in today's standards, the upstairs needed quite a bit of work, because you couldn't, one side was,
Well-
different heights. Go ahead.
Well, less work than building a new condo would take.
But he's a builder,
Right.
and he knew, if he didn't know, he should have known what the condition of the house was before he told this board that he was going to keep that house as part of his plan, which then his plan was approved based on the idea that that house would be part of the plan. Then he changed his mind. So if he's a builder who did not know the condition of a property he was buying, then shame on him.
But in addition, Joan, it didn't have to be maintained as a house. They're talking about building a building on that property now to receive packages for tenants, to store equipment
Office area.
in. That could have functioned like that perfectly well without building a new building.
A rental office, all the things that they want
Yeah.
a new
So
building for.
if there is a building in town, what would be the procedure? If we were to create, if we were to create a historic district, for example, who would have authority? Would it be the Heritage Commission? Would you go before the Heritage Commission and ask, say someone wants to demolish a building that's historic?
Right.
What is your criteria, I guess, would be, do you have a series of criteria or a standard that they would have to meet in
Well, it would
terms
be the
of?
same standard that we
Right.
judge now on houses,
Right.
which is whether they are architecturally, historically, or culturally significant. Only in the historic district, the overlay district of the residential district on 3A, we would have more authority, whereas we are just advisory in any other areas in the town. And we don't have any real authority. We can advise them, we could come up with other suggestions of what they could do with the property. We could try to help them determine, where, if they could get help from the state or some other means, but we don't have any authority to say, no, you can't tear this house
The
down.
final decision lies with the homeowner, and
That still does.
it still does. And it would not, however, in the historic district, on a historic home. And, again, this is an overlay district. There are no restrictions. We don't care that Dark Hall Farm had vinyl siding on it. It's the fact that the historic structure remains there is what we're concerned about. And we're not imposing any restrictions on any residents in the town who live in the district, preventing them from doing anything to their property if they want to. And remember, Mike, not all places are culturally, historically significant. So there are homes and barns within that district, if someone wanted to demolish, that we would agree could be demolished. There was something today on Facebook of within the Londonderry Historic District, a barn that the owner had applied to have taken down. And it was approved. It was a historic barn, but they said it's in terrible condition and it can be taken down. And we would feel the same way. It's, again, all we're trying to do is prevent exactly what happened at Dark Hall Farm.
Mm-hmm.
Someone coming in, buying an old farm property, knocking down the house, and then building a big condo complex, and all of the historic nature of that property has been lost.
So last meeting, we had some concerns regarding how generally applied and non-specific the boundaries of the proposed district is, and as well as how generally and the definitions not of the criteria not being in the proposed zoning ordinance. So have you had any ideas on proposed changes to the proposal to address any of our concerns from the last meeting?
We were invited to come to a workshop, and I thought that that was what we were gonna work on
Listen to what
tonight.
your
But
concerns
do you have
were.
any ideas
Was
on?
to hear you wanted to know what we use for criteria and what authority, or what expertise we have. So we have some information on what we have for expertise
Correct.
and so forth, so.
You asked the question in the right way. What constituted is what they're asking, like the era, structure, and make, that kind of stuff, basically.
So
Which is-
we have an architect who is a member of the Heritage Commission. I have studied American architecture, so we have some significant knowledge of what constitutes a building that is culturally and historically significant within a historic district. And as we said, it's not just old buildings. New buildings can be culturally and historically significant too.
Do you have is there any way we can have some of the criteria be defined in the paper rather than relying on expert testimony?
Well, I think that we would probably follow the guidelines of the state of New Hampshire for historic districts.
Then I think it would be a good idea to mention that in the proposed
Okay.
zoning ordinance, and
We
like
do that.
say
Yeah.
automatically historical if it's in this list, and if it's not, then the
Right.
review is based on this criteria.
And remember, it doesn't have to be historic
Yeah.
necessarily.
So-
If it's in
So that's
the
just
district.
one requirement.
Just a good example of a type of architecture.
So what we're doing here is this committee, is we're responding to what the survey has presented to us. And I think, how many responses did we get?
Almost 2,000.
Almost 2,000. So that's a significant number.
It was
of
tremendous for the
Of
time.
people to respond to this. And in that, we're working on this, and this comes from the state. Okay, there's a Historic District and Heritage Commission's rules and regulations and things that they do. The Heritage Commission is demolition review in New Hampshire, Neighborhood Heritage District handbooks, overview of Heritage Commissions in New Hampshire. Right now, there's estimated 90 communities that have Heritage Commissions or local historic districts. So this isn't something new that we're coming up with. all right?
But
We're just-
ours is probably the least restrictive of
Exactly.
any historic district
So-
in the state of New Hampshire.
I went to a meeting Saturday at the Nashua Historic Society District Building on Abbott Street. And the fellow was there from Salem and said that they were right down to what kind of lights you can hang on a building.
Right.
That's not what we're looking for. What we're doing is we're responding to the community saying they would like this district. What can we do? And so what the Heritage Commission would do, which is what we have in town, which is it's a government organization presented to the town from the selectmen. They have a duty to do their due diligence and go follow all of these things which are set up by the state. To sit here and explain every one of those is a what-if type of a proposal, and that's not something I think we can do. What we're trying to do is get a proposal out to you as far as having some zoning rules, which then the Heritage Commission can use based on the information that they get from the State Heritage Society, which is the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources. So this is not something that is a whim of anybody. This is something that is being done, for the 2,000 respondents. So we're following what the townspeople has asked us to do. We're doing it under state guidelines, right? And we're trying to make it as least restrictive. The folks from the National Regional Planning Commission came to us with a number of proposals. We looked at them as a committee, and we decided that because in the past, they've done this before, and it was not accepted at all. People were not very happy with telling, what color they can put on
It
their
was a
buildings.
very restrictive
Very
proposal.
restrictive.
It was too
So when
restrictive.
it comes to an old building, and if it's something that really is not significant, I think the Heritage Commission is going to be smart enough to do due diligence and do their job.
We
But
will
what-
follow the regulations of the state.
What we
of New
want to give to
Today's
them.
Heritage Commission, I have confidence you'll do the right thing,
Right.
but years to come, who will be populating that commission?
Well, they will
And
still
what
be
will-
required to follow the laws of the state of New Hampshire.
Right.
And we need
So
to make
what
sure that's clearly defined here.
Right. Well, that would be under their regulations. What we want to do on the Historic District Ordinance is give them the ability to do that.
Right.
And so by doing that, it's just a permitted use that they're going to review if somebody wants to tear down a building or,
But we need to give them the criteria that they're working to enable
We
them
maybe need
to
a
make
brief
good decisions.
paragraph saying that we fall under the jurisdiction
Yeah.
of the rules and regulations of the state of New Hampshire for historic district commissions.
So if we had it in there, we're following guidelines of New Hampshire Division of Historic Resources.
Right.
As to criteria of,
for review of the property.
right,
So we're not making up the review process here because that's already been established.
Right.
What we're doing, we just want to come and give the townspeople the opportunity to follow up those 2,000 respondents. We want to give them the opportunity to say, yes, we would like to see our Heritage Commission have some kind of strength to make a decision following under these guidelines. And they would have to follow these guidelines, whether we put it in this ordinance or not. They are still required to do that. Whether you tell them to do it, they're still required under the state
but we
rules.
could
We could
delineate
very
that
easily
in
We could
here.
very
that.
easily add that in, and that wouldn't be a problem. But what I'm saying is,
That's enough.
to think that perhaps somebody's commission is just gonna make decisions arbitrarily, they cannot do that.
And then, of course, the Heritage Commission was voted, voted for by the citizens in a warrant article, and so it was passed and established, and all the members have to be cleared by the Board of Selectmen, so, they do interview you and, to see what kind of.
And the members are appointed by the Board of
Right,
Selectmen.
so that they can see what kind of
Much like
background you
us.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and they must follow the rules and regulations of the state.
Okay.
Okay.
State guidelines. So in order to put that into an ordinance
I
would
think they
not
got that,
probably
Joe.
be
They've got that.
necessary.
They've got that.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't mind adding, saying that we would be following those guidelines if that would be helpful.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, it's almost not necessary. I think your legal
Joe,
will probably
they have
tell you that.
Yeah, but we don't mind adding it. We don't mind tweaking the words as
Yeah.
long as we're not changing the intent.
Mhm.
Another thing that we could do to make it a little more specific would be figure out where the maximum distance away from 3A that you want to
1 acre.
potentially.
It says right on there, it says the frontage, so if a
But
piece,
there are some properties that really stretch really.
Not trying to protect the entire property.
Yeah, but it's good to make it so that things don't have to go through you when you don't want to deal with them anyway.
We already have it in here. It is just an acre deep from Route 3A.
It's acre deep.
Because that's where the old buildings are established. We're not trying to prevent someone. If, for example, the DeRocha farm had been sold to a developer rather than to the Conservation Commission, what we would be trying to prevent is a developer from coming in and knocking down the old farmhouse and barn and then developing the property. We're not saying that they can't develop the property, but work around this historic structure. Use it in your plan, just as it was proposed at Darkall. It didn't end up happening.
Yep, we just have to make sure that the ordinance is specific, references the criteria you use, like we already discussed, and if there are any situations where we can make it so that something can skip you when you guys wouldn't want to take the time to review it, having that in there is good, because extra review is not productive.
Well, we wouldn't necessarily choose to review everything within the district. It would depend on the structure involved.
But the Heritage Commission is still gonna review every demolition
It will come
permit
to
for
us.
every building that's over 60 years old,
Right.
regardless of whether they're in the, that's what, in the bylaws of the.
Anywhere in the town,
of
doesn't
the-
even have to be in the historic
Right.
district. That's part of
We're
the,
still gonna review that, we
Right.
just wouldn't have authority we could only be,
Right.
advisory authority on that.
Yeah.
But if a building
it's
falls within
not
that
within the
criteria of the
district.
age, we're still gonna review it.
If
and
it's not in the
we
district.
have authorized
Pardon
me? If it's
the
not in the
demolition
district.
of several
Yeah,
buildings
any
in
place
town
in
just
town.
this year
Right,
that had no significance at all,
right.
and they were taken down.
Would this, as I recall, I mean, the town many years ago passed the demolition ordinance.
Mhm.
And the creation of the Heritage Commission, I think, kind of went with that. Is this, this proposal that you have now, is this to replace the demolition ordinance, or is it going to be part of it?
It's part of it.
Okay. So, is there any changes that you feel need to be made to the demolition ordinance, or is that just, okay?
It's, it's based on a case-by-case review.
The way I read it here is that under the section 10-2300, enforcement, if it's a violation, whatever somebody's doing there, by a waiver of it, you're referring to the zoning board of adjustment, they can enforce. That panel of board is not an enforcing power. They're only to waive or grant whatever the request is, because everybody has a right to appeal whatever we write,
Sure.
okay? So that section there, I think he'd be, because it's made through, the ordinance, the enforcement of the provision of this ordinance shall be made through the ZBA. It shouldn't be that, it should be through the planning regulations, that's where this is. Okay, it's a historical district regulation, it's not a zoning regulation per se for enforcement. So the ZBA can look at it, and they can, if evidence is brought before them, they can make a decision with your input, of course, because you're part of the process.
Right.
Okay, they can agree or not agree, that's what's gonna happen here, one way or the other.
Mhm.
But I'm just reading the way that was written, they're not the enforcing power, the zoning board is not.
No, I don't think that they are either. I think that the enforcement's gonna come from the town.
You got it.
At the advice of the Historic District Heritage Commission.
And that's just advice, but it can go to the ZBA.
But even,
from that
for
point on.
example, with the Darkall situation,
I understand.
when Mr. Morrow returned to the planning board with an altered plan, the Heritage Commission should have been called in,
I wasn't familiar.
because that's what is required. And we should have been consulted as to whether this building was worth saving. And then a decision would have been made based on that. But, we were all very new to this. We hadn't had many incidents in town where this had gone on.
Right.
I think that was the first incident, as a matter of fact. And so now we have learned from that lesson.
Right, because I think this is the first time we really actually had to look at that
Right,
ordinance.
exactly.
I recall, yeah.
If
Jay,
I may
yes.
just jump in on that point, though, 2300.10 should be amended because enforcement isn't through
ZBA.
the ZBA.
Right.
But I think just to Kevin's point, so if this passes, this is an ordinance, and no one can demolish a building within the historic district without a certificate of approval from the Historic District Commission. If the Historic District Commission denies a permit, that is appealable to the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Correct.
So just to clarify that, or if the board actually grants certificate approval, anybody else aggrieved could appeal it to the zoning board as well.
It's like everything else, the general approval process.
Right.
Or denial process.
It's otherwise enforceable as any zoning ordinance would be.
And one advantage that I see of being more specific and having clear references is when it comes time for potential appeals, it would be good to have a very specific referenced reason for denial and then criteria that the ZBA, which is not trained in what you do, they would have to then make a decision. If they have clear references to criteria in the ordinance itself that they can reference, that would make it so that they are more equipped to handle the appeal.
Well, that would be, I can answer that one too. I'll help you there. If the ordinance is approved, okay, the decision is based off what the regulations made, whoever that person's gonna be. It's gotta be a person. It could be a group, it could be the building inspector saying you have to go through, or the zoning administrator, no matter how they word it here again in the future. But that was how it would play out. Okay, it would have to go that, and so you need something, why are you going, why? You've gotta get to the reasons why you're going to that board, for an appeal or a request for do anything. It's just like anything else in the regulation, if you're gonna go, I got an acre of land with only 100 feet of frontage. Okay, I can't build on that with that unless I get a zoning board approval.
Right.
Okay, unless it's a vested piece of land or prior to planning boards, that they're vested. But when you get into the other stuff, when they change the lot lines on some of these historical houses, which they can, keep the building and change the area, you know, because you're not gonna, some people don't want the land that comes with some of these houses.
Right. We don't have an objection to that.
I know you don't. I'm just getting the picture to it.
Right.
that's all I'm saying.
You know, as I said earlier, we are not trying to prevent people from doing what they wish with their
I
land,
concur.
just not demolishing important structures along that section of the highway because, you know, resoundingly, we have heard that people in town would like to see Route 3A remain a rural road. And fortunately, with Albuquerque, apparently, traffic studies have shown that most of the traffic today anyway is going down Albuquerque and not coming onto the main road.
Joe, did you have a question?
No, I think I got it.
Yeah?
Yes, I'm sorry.
So, I think I asked this last time, but do you have you thought about surveying, any of those property owners? I'm asking because a quick look-see, I see, 4.7 miles, which we stated last time, in the stretch from Robin Ave down to Page Road. To me, that's not 4.7 miles, that's 9.4 really is what you're talking about both sides,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And on both sides, you have, near as I can tell, 152 parcels,
Yeah,
119 of which are already improved or substantially improved with homes or whatever they have on there. Personally, I'd like to hear from those 119 people or the 152 people. Because effectively, it will affect them.
of course it will affect them. I live in that zone too. But the purpose of a historic district is not to poll the people who happen to live in the district to see if they're in favor of it or not.
It's not?
No. Why would you poll them?
Well, if you bought there with the intent that it wasn't, and now that it is,
People have the right to vote.
they do have the right to vote, but there's how many people in town? 8,000 people, how many registered voters here in town? And they're making the decision for 154 parcels?
So you would rather have 150 parcels make the decision for the 8,000?
No, but I would like to get some more input from those 152 parcel owners
Having these public,
first.
well, we're having these
I
public
think it's
meetings and no one's
75
come.
houses, Steve.
But there are
Yeah.
people who live in that area
Yeah.
that live all in that
Which is
area.
great, yeah.
They're on this commission already.
Excellent, so we're down to 100
But we're already there, okay? So what you're asking is you want 150 people to come in and say, no, we don't want this because the 8,000 people, so.
No.
And there aren't that many
No, I'm more
homes in that
curious
district.
as to what,
I think there's only about 75 to 80 houses in that.
In that
oh
type.
no, I counted 119 that have what I consider to be substantial improvements, in other words, not a shed on it. If
Really?
you go up and down both sides, I did it right here while I was sitting here,
Okay.
so,
You got that computer, huh?
well, I could be off with a variance of about 3 to 5%, but I mean, I'm not, believe it or not, I'm not.
Well, in Londonderry, did they
in-
poll before they
opposed.
established a historic
No,
district?
no, I'm not opposed necessarily. I
Well, it
just,
certainly
I
sounds like
just
it.
want to understand if, in this discussion, Jay was just talking about before about the rules that would take place in the event someone wanted to contest, right? And in a variance, to be issued a variance, that applicant needs to demonstrate hardship, right? And so if the hardship is now diminished as a result of, when it wouldn't have been before, as a result of this ordinance, I'm just trying to, understand
What
if
sort
we
of
play
hardship?
this out.
About hardship, I don't know what you're referring to.
It's more of a legal term to demonstrate hardship in some capacity for doing something, to be issued a variance. So, for instance, if you have a parcel that is undersized or doesn't have the right amount of frontage for a proper zone, and you're looking to build on it, and you're asking for, say, can I still build in with this size house? And you get the idea.
We're not talking about building, we're
This
talking about
wouldn't be a
demolition.
No, I
let him
understand,
finish.
but the
I'm sorry.
rules still, they
It
still
would be
apply.
it would be an appeal, administrative appeal to the decision,
Mhm.
so they wouldn't be going for a variance to the zoning board.
No,
Well-
but in the instance where Jay was just mentioning, where someone wanted to appeal, right? The same rules would apply, would they not? Where you would, in order to appeal, you have to demonstrate that this,
5 criteria.
this hardship's been put on you, and in order to have a successful appeal as a homeowner or a parcel owner, you would have to,
Right, in this case, you'd have to show that the decision of the Historic District Commission was erroneous.
yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what types of things could take place. I'm only playing devil's advocate here, right? So so let me ask you, if I had a home that fell in, and lived in this area, and it was pre-1964, right? Because that's, but even if it isn't, even if, my house is, let's say it's 25 years old, and X number of years from now, and we'll have to do the math, 35 years from now, I decided to throw a barbecue where we had one of the presidential candidates on site, and that candidate ended up becoming president of the United States. Is somebody going to deem that a place of historical significance?
I don't think that's realistic,
No, it's not.
Well, I don't know if that falls under.
Otherwise, we'd have 50,000 properties in the
Oh,
United States
I
deemed
know.
historic and couldn't
Oh, I
be
know, I'm
touched.
from New Jersey where George Washington slept everywhere, so, and believe me.
Well, the only things that are deemed that way are by the National Register, and that's very stringent rules to be accepted by the National Register. I don't think there's probably a property in Litchfield eligible for the National Register.
Yet.
But I'm very confused as to where we're going with this. We're talking about giving a commission the ability to enforce a demolition project, not whether somebody's house was slept in by George Washington or a presidential candidate, or whether they have enough frontage or footage or whatever, they want to put a steeple on their house. We're talking about a commission here that's duly noted by the townspeople that looks at a piece of property in a certain district that says whether they have the ability to destroy or demolish the structure. And then whether there's a process in place for that person who owns it, whether it's a hardship or not, that they have a process to follow through. All we're doing here is trying to get a zoning rule in place that gives this commission, which has been approved by the town, which has been approved by the selectmen, which has been with 2,000 people responding to surveys telling us that this is what they want, and about demolition of that property. Where I seem to feel like we're straying onto what if problems and this and that. I think we're here to say, do we want to have a demolition zoning board thing? We put that into place. We give the commission the ability to look at that with all the review processes. They follow the state guidelines, and then have a follow-up where they can go to the zoning board, they can go through the court, they can go through the selectmen if they don't like the decision that's made. But to come and say, well, it's something that might be on the historic register, whatever, but that was, we're giving this commission is the ability to say yea or nay.
Right.
Much like we would give the police
we're
officer.
straying away
Yeah.
from the intent
I think we
of
are.
this article.
Yeah.
And
The
if
intent
this-
of this article is very, very simple.
Yeah.
We are not trying to harm anyone in any way.
A
We're not
review process.
interfering with their property rights in any way. What we're talking about is demolishing or letting fall into such disrepair that they just fall apart, buildings of a historic nature.
And giving them the
And,
opportunity.
this is a very historic town. This is the site of Thornton's Ferry. It was one of the wealthiest little towns in New Hampshire in the early days because of its brick and timber industries. And all we're trying to do is to save for future generations some of the appearance of that on the main road. That's all.
So Mike, what would our next step be? You want us to clarify these things in this document, come back to, present it again? So that
Well, I
this
think-
board-
I
Because I
mean,
understand this board has to vote on it,
Right.
and then, so that's what you want us to do.
Well, I'm
and-
only hearing one thing to be clarified, and that was the enforcement provision going through the zoning board, which we need to take.
You're right there.
Criteria.
They want us to put something in about the,
Well, I
historic.
think what it was the issue of the criteria,
That
and I
we're
think you
following.
have the
cri-
national,
Again,
the state
criteria
guidelines.
come from the state
That-
guidelines.
and
Right.
what they
So
want
I
us
think
to
you
say
wanted to,
That we're following these
No.
guidelines.
But
your
the question
reference.
of
We need to
state
put a
guidelines should be in here.
paragraph in saying
Right,
that
well,
we
that's what
will
I'm saying.
follow the state guidelines.
Right,
Right,
but
they
We don't
want
need to
that.
put all the state guidelines.
No, they want us to
no,
put
no,
this
just to
statement in.
reference the
Right.
document.
Right.
Right.
Now, that document is online, I would assume, or you could, is it a booklet? How thick is it?
I could have
Just
brought the
curious.
booklet with me. We had a
Okay.
copy of it.
Okay.
Can it be had online in today's world?
Oh, I imagine so, because it's from
I'm just
Congress.
asking.
Yeah. Oh, sure, mine was printed out. Someone saw it and printed it out and gave it to me.
Okay.
Maybe even Jay. Did you bring one
Probably.
to us, Jay,
Yeah,
in the
Gail
beginning?
did.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
How many pages, Jay, does that one have? 10?
It was not that
12,
many
14?
pages.
Yeah, no, and there's some other guidelines out there too that we could make available to the board.
That's half the battle, it's not what we got here, is understanding. I know what a historical district is, I've worked with them. And they're different, as you all know, and I've seen people go, who wanna do things for their homes, and they had to go to this committee or group. Okay, but then it went to the zoning board as one way of getting a waiver to it if they wanted to change something.
We're not
Okay.
doing any of that, Kevin. The
I
only
understand.
thing we're
I-
considering is demolition.
What?
The only thing we're considering is demolition. So we shouldn't get sidelined.
Yeah, cause I wouldn't
What
be
you're
able
gonna
to
do
put
to
my
your home,
additional
it's not
front
part of
porch
this
on.
issue.
What did you say?
I wouldn't be able to put my front porch on. I'm
Of
just
course you
kidding.
could.
I know I know I can, I know I can. Okay,
You were misinterpreting
I understand what you're
what
saying.
this says.
I'm just looking at the enforcement side of it, okay? That's all I'm looking at. It's just
Jay, what do
historical
you,
factors.
what do you think in terms of next steps?
So, yeah, I think,
amending this and maybe having some greater clarity, I think would make sense. Typically, the way, I mean, this is the most minimal I've ever seen, because it only applies to demolition. It usually does apply.
To the architecture of the.
It does. It usually apply to varying degrees. There's usually things that are exempt. You know, some towns might exempt windows. Very few do things like paint color, but almost all historic districts do regulate additions, you know, significant repairs, and new construction also, to make sure it's appropriate. So that's typical. And typically what you find is you have an ordinance which is relatively minimal, and then the commission adopts regulations which are more comprehensive. And those are usually the ones that spell out what the application procedure is going to be, what's the criteria going to be. And usually there is some criteria where you're evaluating every building based on its contribution, its significance architecturally, and its contribution to the district as a whole. And there, usually you can find a building, you know, you can rate it, how important it is. Sometimes it's non-contributing, so it is a later structure, and, you know, so usually you spell that out. And then there is very often for demolition a good cause provision, where somebody can demonstrate that it might be significant, it might be all these things, but I can show good cause as to why. And that's usually because the cost of the repair outweighs the value, or that it's deteriorated to a point where it's beyond saving. And that is usually a back and forth, right?
But Jay, doesn't that already fall under the Heritage Commission?
I'm just saying, generally, when
Yeah.
you look at the historic districts, they adopt regulations that lay out these things.
Because
So,
we're being administered by the Heritage Commission. We're not having a separate Historic District Commission.
yeah, and that could be, what I'm just saying is that typically there's two parts to this. One is the ordinance, and the other is the regulations that you adopt.
Right.
That explain how, let's say this passes and there has to be a certificate of approval. Well, now what, right? There's gonna have to be an application form, there's going to have to be how many days, how often does, you know, the, commission meet? How many days before do you apply? You know,
It's already
all
in
of
there.
that stuff, what information,
It's all in the Heritage Commission rules.
then you'll have to just specify that those, somehow you're gonna have to have a regulation that says,
This is too vague
Applies
for this.
for,
this,
This is very
right.
vague.
So-
that it
so-
also applies to buildings
We'll
in
need
the
another little
historic
paragraph
district,
saying that
yeah.
we're also under the rules of the Heritage Commission.
Yes.
Regulations, yeah. Okay.
The New Hampshire Heritage Commission you're referring to.
The Litchfield Heritage Commission has its own rules and regulations.
Correct, we have that, yeah, I understand that, seeing that.
I'm not sure that there is a New Hampshire Heritage Commission, Kevin.
I'm just asking. that's
Okay.
all. That's all I could- Sorry.
Anybody, I mean, feel free for everybody to chime in, I mean, I'm not, want to ask any more questions?
Okay.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, certainly, I think that having that type of a, process, and I think that's pretty much what it is the process, or the procedure, is critical in order to be effective, and to make those decisions as a board, so, you know, I think that everybody seems to, I think most people would agree that I think it's a great thing to be able to put something like this together, but just want to make sure that, you know, and I think people have concerns, and I appreciate that. I mean, in terms of procedure, that we're basically doing what's necessary, or that you're going to be doing what's necessary as the Heritage Commission. You just want to be able to have something in place that you're going to be able to carry it out and effectively, so.
All right, so we should add a paragraph to this document.
I think you should.
stating that we will fall under the jurisdiction of the state of New Hampshire's guidelines.
Right, you want to put something about the guidelines.
Right.
And,
Under the rules and regulations
Of the
Heritage Commission of the
Commission.
town of Litchfield.
right,
Because they will be the ultimate people who decide
right. And
decisions are made.
however you do your rules or whatever within that commission, yeah, you want to basically reference that.
Otherwise, we're going to be setting up another commission in town
Yeah, well,
and trying to find members to join it.
It'll be the same.
I think we have enough committees now, I don't know.
Right.
And you also gotta have the dates, and, because you got newer structures that won't apply, like for the heritage.
Well, that's also under the heritage, Kevin. They've got to be 60 years or older.
Oh, God, I'm too young.
Right.
Nice try.
My house is exactly
Kim Queenan
70 years
researched all
old.
these rules and regulations for
Yeah.
the Heritage Commission very thoroughly.
I understand.
Yeah.
And
I understand that
so
role.
she has addressed already
I
everything
I
that we've
understand.
thought of.
I know.
So probably what's the next step would be, is to get those, that language included
Okay.
into the
I think so.
draft. And then we'll come back.
In the
and
enforcement
we can
correction, that's all.
Review it and, I guess we could decide, if there's any more questions that need to be addressed or whatever at that time. And then, if the board is willing, wants to put it out to public hearing, they could do that. It's up to the board.
Yeah, wouldn't it have to? It's going on to the ballot as
Yeah.
It has to have a hearing.
zoning ordinance.
Right.
And it would be good to have a hearing because
Correct.
people are going to misunderstand
Right.
what a historic district is. So if they need to come in person and hear how it might affect them.
So we would do that, and then, obviously,
There'll be some outside correspondence being sent, I'm sure, on the web pages and everything else, that kind
Well,
of.
there will be because people will not know
Correct.
what this is about
You
and they're
put
just
that
going
on
to
it.
jump to the conclusion.
Right. Once the regulation is drafted, we can put that out.
Right.
okay. Anything else?
Any other questions? Suggestions? We're open to.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm hurt because I'm not that old. But it bothers me.
Keep working on it, you'll get there.
Like
Well,
I
we may
said,
not
nice
be
try,
saving you,
Kevin.
but we'll save your house. How's that?
I've saved it already. The asbestos is gone.
Donald and Odine would
I
be,
know,
Kevin, Donald and Odine would be very happy because they built that,
I know they did.
So I guess one
My
just,
father helped, my grandparents were on that too.
so I guess one question just about the process and regulations is, so there's the general guidelines in the ordinance, and then there's the regulations that are adopted by the, Heritage Commission in this case. So could theoretically the Heritage Commission adopt regulations that might be too strict or too lenient?
Well, they would have to be voted on by the voters.
Okay,
The regulations that are there were voted on.
Okay.
They weren't
Well-
something that the Heritage Commission came up and said, this is what we want for regulations.
yeah, it was a town meeting,
Yeah.
that's why it was
Yep.
created.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, so, they don't have free reign on what they do.
Yeah.
They
Hold on
they
just a
are-
second. Yeah, so this is a public meeting, I will allow public comment, so yes, please.
She's on
If
the
you could
committee.
just state your name and address for the record, I'm sorry.
Gail Berenger.
Yes.
Member of the Litchfield Historical
Sit here,
Commission. Thank you. We've worked very hard to boil this down to something that would be understandable and palatable to the Litchfield residents. And I'm wanting to be very clear before we leave tonight that on the second page of our proposed ordinance, under section 2300.09, is this where you're suggesting we add to the wording? Because I think it's quite clear that the Litchfield Heritage Commission will be responsible for administering the ordinance and regulations within the historic district as provided by RSA 676:8-10. So I'm assuming, and I just don't want to go away.
That paragraph's already there.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, I'm assuming, I don't want to go away to our work session and not understand that you're accepting this and you want it modified as you just discussed.
The modification that I'm referring to that needed to be done
Yes.
is the
Is the
enforcement
elimination
section.
of the paragraph below.
Well, not elimination, because it has, oh, yes, because it'd be part of the zoning the planning regulations.
Right.
And that appeal process goes through
Right.
that, right?
Yeah.
I wanna
And
make
then you
sure-
want it just clarified to say that we'll be following the
It already
guidelines.
says it.
It says it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It says it in 09.
It's that paragraph.
09 says
It doesn't say that it doesn't
Your
spell
RSAs.
out, well, it doesn't spell out the state, I think they want it spelled
Well,
out.
that's what they are.
I know, but they want this spelled out in so many words, is that right,
Okay,
Jared?
you want it noted, I think what you're saying is that we should note that the state is where it came from, or,
Because the RSA is
Well,
quoted.
that's
Yeah,
where
the
RSA's come
RSA
from, is the state.
that is the RSA from the state.
That's the RSA from the state. I'm not sure
Right,
what,
right.
state of New Hampshire.
I know, we don't have any here like that.
So if that's in there, do you still want it spelled out that,
Well, as long as it's in there.
It's
in there.
If it's in there,
It's in there.
it's fine.
Can you provide a copy of that for us?
Could we do what?
of the RSAs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I
I
can
didn't
go
bring
find
one
it
that I had.
somehow.
Yeah.
I'll go find
you're
it.
talking about what I provided?
Yeah, the RSA.
Right.
He doesn't do online.
Okay,
I went to the Litchfield school system. I'm still studying.
okay, okay. Okay, so then what we're looking at for a change to this is
This
strictly 2300.10, and we're removing that sentence.
We'll look at that and make sure it falls under the zoning. Jay will look into that, I believe, right, Jay? Make
Yeah,
sure-
yeah, it does.
It does.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going down a
I
different
think
road,
Jay
but
already
that's
had an
okay.
answer to that.
Yeah. I just want, I don't want to see two things going on, that's what I'm referring to. Administrative of it is through the historical, the Heritage Commission. And the enforcement of it is through the planning board regulations.
Well,
Odd.
not exactly.
Okay, help me with this one.
It would be enforceable as a zoning ordinance, so
Right, yeah.
it wouldn't involve the planning board at all. It would be
Heritage,
enforced
correct.
by the Board of Selectmen as they do any ordinance or regulation.
The governing body.
Right.
So it wouldn't go to the zoning board?
It would only go to the zoning board if somebody was aggrieved, if somebody was making an appeal.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
all I'm referring to as an appeal of a decision that you
But
may have.
does that need to be, that's just the rules and regulations of the way government functions. You don't have to write
You don't
that
have
into
to, you
this.
don't, no, you don't have to say that, no. You can, you don't have to.
I just looked the way it read it. I thought it was a little, but now I see.
Well, we just had the wrong information. We thought it was to the zoning.
What I'm
board.
struggling with, quite honestly, is I'm not sure that the Heritage Commission is empowered by statute to regulate a historic district.
Good point.
That's
check
where I'm
that out.
struggling with. We could
Okay.
probably talk about that offline, but
Yeah.
I don't see that. I see what the statute says is that if you have if you create a historic district, you must have, I believe, a historic district commission. The Historic District Commission may assume the powers of the Heritage Commission, or the municipality could choose to have both. The Historic District Commission could seek the assistance of the Heritage Commission, but you would have to have a Historic District Commission.
All right, so we're gonna have to have another commission.
Or the Historic District Commission could assume the powers and duties of the Heritage Commission.
Right.
It
and then
can't
they
be
would
the other
become
way
one.
around.
But it can't be the other way around.
Okay.
Oh,
That's how I read the statute.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's simple. If you already got it here, upon the adoption of the warrant article, the Litchfield Historical District Committee, okay, it says here will cease to exist. But actually, it'll still be there.
Because we had no appointed commission, Kevin.
It's
This
just a
was just
committee that we
volunteers.
set up.
So you can still, it'll still be one and the same, it'd just be, instead of calling it Heritage, we'd call it Historic District Commission.
Correct.
So
And
that's
then that will
what
follow
we'll,
into
that's what
place.
the voters will be voting on.
Yeah.
That would have, yeah, I would just make that,
Separate.
Terminology.
ordinance.
yeah, it's not a big deal, but
It's all about terms.
Well, we want to go away and spend our time wisely and use your time wisely.
Right.
And
I think you got it.
this
Thank you, Gail.
clarification was necessary.
Yeah.
I'd also like to say that in regard to the Corning House at Dark Hall, which was an ancestral home of mine, Mr. Moreau had commented to the union leader that the house was going to stay. If the Heritage Commission and those of us that are activists in town had known ahead of time that his intent really was not to save the home, there are agencies and companies and interested private persons who might have wanted to come and move the house, save the house, move it to another location. The Bixby House was Stephen's ancestral home. And the house where I grew up in was in Litchfield since 1730. And it was in my family until my grandmother died in 1976. I still live on a portion of the land where Chief Passaconaway actually lived and farmed in the summer. The Charles Bancroft Highway is the old Indian Trail. So we're talking about, yes, preserve our historic houses, but as you said, folks are saying preserve that feel of Charles Bancroft. That's a historic section of our town. We have the muster grounds, the only muster grounds left in the state.
Untouched.
Untouched, thank you.
Welcome. Yep,
And
we do. So,
Passaconaway was a very important person in this town, a very, very important person that farmed and lived here. So our culture, our feeling for this town is very sincere. We want to do this right. And I thank you for your questions and your comments, and I'm glad we got the clarification.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you, Gail.
So,
Thank you.
So, just to clarify once more, we're taking out that sentence, and we're putting in, guide me with that, Jay?
You would just be, so where you say, let me find it.
I think it's on
Powers
11.
and duties of the Historic Districts Commission, 2300-09.
Yeah.
That title is correct. I would just say, this is probably where you want to say, if your intent is to only have one, I would put right in here, the Historic District Commission shall assume the powers and duties of the Heritage Commission. I'd put that right in there.
Litchfield Heritage Commission shall be responsible, so take that part of it out.
Yeah, I would say that the Litchfield Historic District Commission shall be responsible for administrating the ordinances and the regulations within.
Okay.
I would strike the last sentence.
Yes.
And then if you only want to have one group, then I would add a line in here that says that the Litchfield Historic District Commission shall assume the powers and duties of the Heritage Commission.
Yep. It's where you're not dealing with A and B.
Right.
You're bringing it together where it should be.
Well, yeah, and we can't
Yeah.
man all these committees.
Exactly.
No,
because This is our same, 24 people that are on all the committees in town, so.
Okay, so we will make those changes, and we'll
Okay.
come back in to see you for a brief little get-together to make sure that everything looks okay.
bring cookies.
Bring
Is that one
cookies?
the
Okay.
updated draft?
Oh, Joe, those cookies that you make that were so good,
yeah,
bring it back.
I like to cook, so I just.
Well, we thank you,
Thank you.
guys.
all
Thank
your
you.
time and effort,
Thank
and
you
we
for your
do
help.
appreciate
Next
it
the one in the back quietly.
very much.
Thank you.
I concur with everything that they said today.
Okay.
I know you could.
She drew up this whole document.
Is there, they said there was
I was
wording
born in this town in
for
1948, so I've seen a
acre
lot of
within-
changes, for sure.
You're still new.
But it would be nice to preserve the
Oh, no, her
flavor
family's
and
not
the
new.
tone of the town.
Well, you got me beat. Stephen too. No, this.
Her family's not new, we're related.
Thank you.
Jared had a quick question before you guys go about the acreage.
like I think you made a comment about it being the acre.
It's an acre deep.
Okay, where is that spelled out?
I thought that we had it in here. I'll reread it. If we don't, I'll make a note
I
to
think
put
you
it in.
just said frontage.
Sounds good.
You just said frontage, you're correct on that, Joe. So we can add something in on that.
Because the acre
Or
could
set
be
a
narrow and
distance
long.
from the main road, either.
Well,
Yeah, 'cause
the
it
only
would
thing
be
set
we're
back,
worried
too.
about is the
Yeah.
buildings on it, which
I
generally
understand.
fall in that acre.
Yeah, it would
Look,
probably
yeah,
be
but sometimes they
simpler
won't be.
if it's just a distance
This
from
is the
3A.
center line or something.
So it has to have frontage and the structure has to be within a certain distance. And just look at what homes you believe are historical, see what distance would encompass all of them, and that would probably be a good number to use.
Okay.
Very
Good
good.
workshop.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
48, yes, she's a little older, 6 years.
All right, moving,
30, didn't you used to live there?
I'm on the grave site down there, so this is the second one here.
moving on,
Take care, guys.
thank you, have a good night. Moving on to, stormwater. You wanna talk about that, Joe?
Stormwater, sure.
Whenever we decide, don't go to North Carolina, South Carolina, and talk about it,
I'm just gonna,
okay? Another work down there.
I'm gonna unplug. Stormwater?
Not
All right,
there.
so this is, I kind of went overboard. I don't know that I accomplished our initial goal, but I kind of went overboard. All right, so just take one, pass it down.
You did.
I did. Because once I got on a roll. So I'll just kind of walk through it, explain what I did and why. Some of it is just, you don't have to stress it at all. It's just grammar. Punctuation, little missing things. One of the challenges I think that we had as those who were on the board at the time recall, is that we were really under the gun.
Yeah.
And part of being under the gun and making substantial changes, and as you go along, there's a lot of things that you might have caught that are relatively small, but we just didn't. So, for the most part, I've stayed away from significant substance. I did, this is something that came up, and this was also a suggestion I know that came from the town administrator, and from other staff and others who thought about this. So just backing up a little bit on how this was constructed. Well, I'll back up a whole lot because everybody wasn't here. So the town of Litchfield is required to adopt both an ordinance and regulations to comply with federal EPA municipal stormwater regulations known as MS4. And Litchfield was behind in complying, and so we were basically under, I might use the term incorrectly, we were basically under an order from EPA to make the changes that are necessary to the ordinances and regulations by the end of June of 2024. So that's kind of what happened. The town has a consultant for MS4 specifically, who's doing a whole lot of things, looking at infrastructure, advising the town in many ways. Part of also what fell under his scope was helping to craft the ordinance that was adopted ultimately at last town meeting, and then the regulations of the planning board that came after. So that was kind of the framework. And the way that was done was by adding, for the most part, language to Litchfield's existing stormwater regulations, which Litchfield has had for many years. So the way Litchfield's Litchfield's stormwater regulations were constructed is that they applied to subdivisions and site plans that were coming before the planning board that were disturbing 15,000 square feet or more. MS4 applies to any land development activity that exceeds an acre or more. So the two big differences are, one, we said 15,000. The more stringent, I guess I would say, and comprehensive federal requirements kick in at an acre. The other difference is it doesn't matter whether you're coming to the planning board for subdivision or site plan approval. If you are disturbing more than an acre or more, you are subject to MS4. So that could mean that you are a homeowner or a business, and, well, business isn't a good example. Let's say you're a homeowner, and for whatever reason, you want to do some significant site work on your property. Maybe that's involving putting in a new septic system and a pool and a whatever. You would be subject, even though there's no planning board approval required. You would now have to get a permit from the planning board. So, obviously, that's a whole different animal. So, in essence, we had to create regulations that would apply to anyone. And in addition to whatever planning board approvals might be required, if they're required, you have to get a stormwater management permit. So this is a new thing that the board does. It is now a permit that you'll have to get. If you're coming in for subdivision and site plan review, you'll still have to get the permit. It's still gonna be a separate process, kind of like a conditional use or whatever. So these are these parallel processes. So one of the things that we did was, when this draft was originally done, we kept the 15,000 square foot disturbance or more requirement for subdivision and site plan. And then we added on the acre or more. And that did lead to some confusion and issues in the regulations. So what was absolutely suggested by staff, and which also came up in our public hearings, was, why don't we eliminate the 15,000 square foot requirement? So that's what I did here. I just said, these are the stormwater management regulations. They apply consistently if you're disturbing an acre or more. We don't have to do that, but that's what I did. I thought it made it simpler. So that was the biggie. And then what I tried to do also was look at ways of, can we reduce the burden of the reporting requirements, which was one of the things that we heard a lot of pushback on during the public hearing process. And I have not been able to get a clear answer as to exactly what is required and what isn't. So a couple of the sources that I looked at are on the DES website. They do provide examples of stormwater regulations. The one I think I looked at probably the most closely was, there was a kind of model regulation that was put together by the Southern New Hampshire Stormwater Coalition. So that is a group that's been meeting monthly since this began. So for a few years now, they've been meeting monthly, and they consist of representatives of all affected communities in the Nashua Regional Planning Commission region and the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission region. So they did put together some language. Their language does include, pretty much word for word, the reporting requirements that we had. There is another example that's on the DES website. I think it was from the town of Bedford, and they don't. So it really kind of led me feeling, well, what actually is the guidance? I'm not really sure. Nevertheless, I tried to take I did keep it in, but I tried to take a stab at softening it. So we'll get there as I walk through it. So if it's okay with you guys, I'm just going to kind of walk through what I did and why. The very first thing I didn't do, and I'm going to do, is change the title. But nevertheless, so just kind of out of the gate, without going through this word for word, I eliminated language in here that I thought was unnecessary, or language that suggested that we had two tiers. So now it simply says, projects that undertake, or any projects that undertake a land disturbing activity that results in the disturbance to an area equal to or greater than 1 acre shall obtain a stormwater management permit from the planning board prior period. So I just really, really clear up front.
You did.
That's what you need to do. Moving on down, we have, there's probably more in here, but as I mentioned earlier, we have to change our definition of a butter. There's absolutely no reason to have a definition in here, right? It's defined by statute. Let's take it out. There's inconsistent terminology that I found in here. So for example, under applicant, it says, initially it said permitting by law requesting a soil erosion and sediment control permit. No, it is a stormwater management permit. So I'm trying to be consistent throughout with language. Kind of next, the stormwater permitting authority, it's the planning board, we already established that. So I've tried to say that. Again, I'm not gonna go word for word. The next page, these are all grammatical.
Yep.
Same thing on the next page, there's really nothing. So we don't get to anything a little bit more substantive until we get to page 4.
Yeah.
And on the bottom of page 4, applicability, you can see I just struck the 15,000 square foot language.
Correct.
So it's just, again, clear. Moving on to page 5. For some reason in here, this section 3.2 describes a process for the planning board to adopt fees. We have a process. We don't need another process. Planning board can adopt reasonable fees, and it simply refers to the appendix where all the fees are. For some reason, it had under fee structure, inspection shall be performed by an inspector knowledgeable, blah, blah, blah. That just doesn't belong under fee structure at all. I took that out. It will come up later. Again, all this language I don't think is necessary. Moving on down to minimum requirements. This is actually repeated in here, and I really don't know why, so I struck it here. You'll see that these requirements show up again on the next page. So, again, I think that's a legacy of combining regulations. So,
Do it over and over and over.
right, so I say on the next page,
Put it right there.
right, actually, on page 6, there's really nothing to really jump out at you. But as I noted, if you go down to 3.5, this is the application requirements.
Yep.
Here you can see, under construction drawings, these are all the same things, north arrow, et cetera. So that's where all of that was repeated.
It's common.
So that's all there. Nothing really jumps out until page 8. Minor things, like on 3.7.2, erosion control plan shall be reviewed by the Hillsborough County Conservation District. They haven't done anything like that in 20 years, so that just doesn't happen anymore. 3.8.3, if permission is denied, again, we say that already elsewhere, we don't need to say it again. And then, other required permits. I saw this as unnecessary to state that there's other federal permits that are required. There are probably more requirements that we're not listing, such as you might have to have Army Corps approval, et cetera. So I don't think we need to try to list federal permits that are required. I just struck it. Moving on to the next page, nothing really significant here. Those are minor. Going on to page 10, I just highlighted these section numbers because it's one of the things, I thought about just eliminating these. One of the nuisances about amending regulations is you strike something, now the numberings all change, and you've got to remember to go back and make sure your references are correct. So I just highlighted them for my own shorthand. And then moving on down, 310.6, public hearing. This had its own noticing requirements and its own public hearing requirements, 14 days before I put it in there. Well, that's not consistent with our, we want it consistent with our hearing requirements. So I struck that. We don't need a separate process. It's the same process. Same thing, there was a different appeal requirement in here, and kind of once again, no, we'll be consistent. We have one statutory appeal process.
You got it.
Flipping the page, nothing. And again, obviously you can look through this later, but there's really nothing substantive on most of the next pages. Again, I'm trying to go through and do things like, we've used the term applicant pretty consistently, then sometimes the term permittee surfaces, I'm striking it and replacing it with applicant.
You got it.
So
Would be.
And most of this is, so getting onto page 17, this is one area where I was hoping to soften a little bit. 3.14.2, inspector qualifications. So here is where we have the two licensed professionals listed. I did add the or other qualified professional approved by the planning board. And the reason I put that in there is precisely because there may be times when what we're approving just really doesn't rise to the level of needing an engineering report. This is a way of softening that and potentially reducing the cost.
Yep.
You have to put together your operations and maintenance plan. The board can say, yeah, I mean, for what you're doing, anyone, any reasonable person you could put in here could be able to report. Same thing in 3.14.3. Again, I added or other qualified professional. That could be another type of contractor. And then moving on to the next page, there really isn't a whole lot of substance here. Other substantive changes. So those are really the big changes. I did leave in the requirement that, so during construction, and this is a burden. There's no question that it is. During construction, you have to be inspecting your stormwater facilities a minimum of every 7 days or before or after a storm event. And you have to report that, to the board or to its designee. I left that in there. That seems to be what I'm seeing in a lot of places. It is true. It is going to be burdensome. My hope was, at least by adding other qualified professional, depending on the scope of what it is, it may not have to be that you're hiring an engineer. Because that really is the part that I think was underscored as costly, is you did not previously have to have an on-site engineer to be looking at this, at your project that frequently. We do inspections now. It's just the frequency that's an issue. It's just kind of hard to get away from. These are the stormwater management requirements, and you kind of need somebody looking at it and reporting on it, because the town has to report to EPA saying this is what we're doing, this is how we're complying, and part of that's going to be the reports that they get. And then there is, so I did leave it in there, and then there is a requirement, and this is also a burden, there is no question, of an annual report thereafter. And so that is still in there. Once again, hopefully by having that language, it doesn't always have to be an engineer. It's going to be for bigger projects. It's going to be, you're going to have a professional in there, but for other ones, it may be less so. I will just add one other note I forgot on the top of page 16, 3.13.2. This was one of the issues that came up of we shouldn't have to have a homeowners association. We might not want to create a homeowners association. So just a couple of things about this section is it doesn't say you have to do any of these things. What it says is
313.2.
If you look at the last sentence, when developing these procedures, and these are your operation and maintenance procedures, it says the applicant should consider. So these are considerations of how to manage it. They're not mandatory. The escrow is something that may be required. It almost certainly will be in a larger project. And then it says the establishment of a homeowners association, condominium association, or other designated party responsible. So I did put that in there to make it clear that, because of course, you could have a rental property. They're not going to have a homeowners association. So in your plan, you need to designate who that responsible party is. It could be any one of these things. It just has to be designated. And then the very last one I just added, where applicable, because sometimes, actually I thought it was a little bit weird, request for acceptance of ownership by the town of Litchfield of privately owned BMPs, but nevertheless, maybe it could happen. Can't imagine why the town would say sure, but it's in there, we'll add it. So that's pretty much it. Everything else was really a matter of terminology. One other thing I'll do globally, if we want to go down this road, is these little things annoy me, but maybe not everyone else. Is half the time applicants capitalized, half the time it isn't. Let's just decide and make it that way consistently. That's a very minor thing.
You're setting up the responsible factor all the way through, the applicant.
Right. Right.
And I agree with that. That's been complicated.
Yes, it is. One other very minor thing I took out, but this does suggest that every time there's a change of ownership, we have to notify the planning board. And in thinking about that, you've got a subdivision, we're gonna notify every single time there's a sale. We don't want that. It doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't make any sense.
My lawyer said that.
So I just left that as, if there's a change in the party that's financially responsible, then you wanna know, otherwise, we don't need to know every time the ownership changes.
Right.
In most cases, when you get into a site plan or a large development, the inspection process is the town engineer for stormwater construction methods, but during the process, if it's a site plan, the building official at the time has to ensure that it's in compliance with the site plan too as well. So the drainage is there, but the town engineer will take care of that from the beginning. But once he's gone, you gotta, the associations, I will say in town here, when I was here, they were particular about what happened there, and they wanted to make sure it was all right, and they got approvals beforehand. And they're very particular. I give them credit.
And that is, I mean, one of the big changes with this is that in terms of process, if there is a subdivision and they're public streets and we're gonna have
It's all
public
town
stormwater
stuff.
infrastructure,
All town.
we've always had the town's consulting engineer out there reviewing at the intervals that he thought made sense. Under this, it would be more frequent, almost certainly, but that's always been a practice that's been there. It's not been our practice on, say, a private site plan, because it wasn't public infrastructure. So where it's tying in maybe, but we haven't had that level of scrutiny on a private site previously. That's gonna have to change under these regulations. It doesn't mean that the town engineer has to do it, someone has to do it.
During the final approval of anything on a major, like you take the multifamily cluster going up, okay? That right there, there's so much going on that it's all engineered and brought into a certain point. And during the process, a town engineer, whoever would look at that and make sure it's in compliance with that, okay? But the other side, once it's done, the homeowners association or the owner, in this case, they're gonna be very particular what gets touched, what not get touched. You're not gonna see too many problems there. I found that out in reality, unless you get into a commercial site plan with a mall in it. Down 10, 15 years after it's built, you get in some changes that occur.
Yeah.
But that's common, no matter where you
Yep.
are.
And I think one of the things that I imagine we'll do, and this was something that was discussed when we were reviewing Tallarica, the subdivision, was
Simple.
obviously you're really going to want to try to stress, stormwater management solutions that will minimize future maintenance, structures that don't need to be cleaned out.
In the design.
Right, in the design.
It has
That's
to be
going to be in
in the
everybody's
design.
interest.
Can't be, once it's built, we own it.
Right.
Okay? And that's what we're going through right now, with the stormwater that we got going on now.
Yeah.
And we have to do that every year or so, or every other year, regarding, some of the roads we have. Most of my drainage system is in good shape.
And as we also saw in,
The beaver.
that application, I hate to pick on one application, but it was happening at a time when this was all being discussed.
Drafted,
You also don't want to burden unduly an individual homeowner who happens to have a drainage structure on their lot by way of an easement.
Yep.
That's for the benefit of the whole development. The burden shouldn't fall on them to inspect it and on them to have to maintain it. So those are definitely things that,
If it's there,
To be
you got
thought
an
of.
easement, though. You have an easement that we have to maintain. That's what that easement for the drainage structure is, to bring it to a detention area.
right,
Okay, so that's all governed, once we accept the road of the plan, we accept those, the town has responsibility for those. That's all new to me.
That's all the thing. So that's what I got. Obviously, I think everyone's gonna want
I
to have a
like
chance to
this.
take a look at it,
A
but.
lot of work here, thank you.
The grammar was good.
Thank you.
Joe,
Yeah.
you were the first one, 'cause the grammar's off.
Well, I mean, realistically.
Humor.
At that point, we weren't worrying,
I know.
we had so much more to think about than where a semicolon was.
I'm new.
And I don't know if it was your intention, but it also kind of seems like it addressed a lot of the smaller concerns from the latest letter that we got from Goatsman and Hollis, particularly like more of their syntactical things. So it only leaves about like 5 things that I saw left, which is a lot easier to kind of deal with and think about.
Yeah, right. And there may be, obviously, more tweaks that we want to make, so.
Okay.
Here we are.
So with the rewording, does it still have language that says 15,000 square feet or more?
That's all gone. So hopefully, if I missed something,
So,
it's an error.
so if it's a really tiny thing that still happens to require a site plan or subdivision, these will apply?
No, they will not apply unless they're disturbing an acre or more. Realistically, most of what we see is, but most of the small stuff that, like I'm trying to think that, them putting in the barbecue place at the tree farm, they wind up having to request waivers because technically they're supposed to do it. So the small stuff this just wouldn't apply anymore, and realistically, we're granting waivers most of the time for the small stuff anyway.
Is there any background on why the application or the requirements were 15,000 square feet in the first place?
I don't have any background.
Conservation.
It was 15,000 in the section D originally.
Right.
Okay.
That was
Conservation had some
adopted.
input into that back in the day. I forget what their concerns were or how we arrived at those numbers.
It was a very long time ago, so
Yeah.
I honestly just don't remember.
Averagely, the leach field is about 10,000 square feet, to between 5 and 10,000 when you figure the sloping. Disturbing, each house lot you get is less than 15,000 feet combined, because you got an acre. And you figure you take the house and a leach field, and the driveway and some lawn, very little. You still very little. The acre is the best way to go. Because everybody wants to remodel their land. I see people cut the trees down after some storms and stumping and get more lawn, which is fine. As long as you stay away from the buffers.
Right.
That's half the battle.
Okay, so would there be any people who would have concerns about the changing of the requirements to an acre?
I can't say there wouldn't be.
Kim wanted to change that 15,000 out of there, so I got a copy for her as well.
Kim, well,
Kim wanted the 15, thought the 15 should come out.
Kim being Kim
Right.
Queenan,
Kim Klein.
Kim Kleiner.
I mean,
And these regulations, like the amendments that were made for complying with MS4 were amended on top of the old regulations. So, were there any incompatibilities between those parts?
I think that those were already, anything that was a significant issue or incompatibility was already dealt with when we went through our prior iterations. So because we did a lot of wordsmithing, I think what wound up being left was more the redundancy, where we simply said things twice because we said them before and we added them again.
Yeah.
But I'm not aware of anything that I would say would be a conflict.
Okay.
And I will say, I'd suggested taking out the 15 and just sticking with the acre. The town can be more stringent, it just can't be less. So if we decided we want a lower threshold than an acre, we could.
Yeah.
What I think is challenging is, in essence, having 2 different processes that we're gonna try to manage. I think that's more cumbersome than necessary.
You're looking for it.
So,
Small.
Yeah.
so would, section, on page 16, would section 3.13.4 basically allow us to, make some exceptions for, like, projects that don't have much stormwater, like disturbances?
I'm sorry, which section?
3.13.4,
Yes.
so that's.
There's some flexibility that the planning board has, yes.
Yeah, so if it ends up like, this is not gonna need much maintenance, this is a nice low maintenance thing, it doesn't disturb much area, we can, what can we, waive without causing problems with MS4?
Well, I think that what this is really saying is that the board's gonna make the final decision. And when it does, it's going to, as is kind of listed, I kind of alluding to, in some ways, our prior conversation, these are the things that it's gonna consider in making its decision. And, it doesn't necessarily say you're waiving requirements, it just says the board is the one who's gonna make the final decision, and these are the things it's gonna consider when it makes that decision. It's possible it could ask for something above and beyond in terms of the, maintenance plan. It might say, consistent with the regulations, the board might say, for example, we don't think you necessarily need to have a PE examine this every year, given the scope of this, so you wouldn't be waiving the essential requirements, but you would be saying, this is what we think makes sense. So when we approve this operation and maintenance plan, we're gonna be looking at these factors within the context of the regulations.
You need the flexibility in the regulation in order to get it to flow.
Right, because every site, we know every site's different,
Interesting.
and so you're going to want to come up, because the operation and maintenance plan obviously has to be specific to the site. It's got to be
Based off what was approved.
based on what was approved, based on the drainage system that's there, based on the site conditions, the water bodies that exist, maybe there's a stream traversing the, so that, I think that's what that's really saying. It's not so much a waiver provision.
Correct.
Yeah, so let's say one property is, really big, but it's just one house. And they have a lot that requires them to have an infiltration, pond. And some stormwater basins on their driveway, theoretically.
Right.
Would we, would that homeowner need to, hire someone, or would it make sense for there to be certain criteria for them to self-inspect that?
That's why I stuck in that language that allows, some other person other than a PE.
Yep.
You could designate in that instance, that might be more than adequate in a case like that. Especially if you're looking at drainage structures that are
Drainage
simple,
methods.
right?
Yeah.
Where any reasonable person could say, yes, it's not clogged with leaves, as an example.
Yeah.
And-
It all goes down to a detention basin or a swale, which you got them all through town. The biggest problem we got with them, we don't maintain them, but I'm just saying that's the basics of it, okay? We're starting to maintain what we have now.
Yeah, the biggest problems I see in town are, many people's, drainage under their, like the pipes under their driveways, they're
They're
getting
within the
pretty.
right of way 99% of the time, so it's a right of way situation as well, and that's the road agent's responsibility to bring that up.
But I think that's exactly right. In a lot of towns, that's the issue you see, is that those areas, those drainage ditches along the side of the road, the culverts under the driveways are getting clogged with brush and,
That's common.
multiple dumpings of lawn clippings and, right, that's what happens,
There's
yeah.
no such thing as a leave.
So yeah, I think this is, a great improvement, so would the next step be a public hearing?
If it's the will of the board to send it to public hearing, then yes, then that would be a vote to
The
send it to
changes.
public hearing, and then, yeah.
And I'm
It's a
sure,
rule change, so.
I'm sure
yeah, right.
the parties that left comments on the last time will probably be interested in reviewing this and having additional comments.
I'm sure that's true.
Unfortunately, we're not under any deadlines for this.
Unlike zoning, we don't have a deadline with this. That's right. We've got time.
These are our regulations.
The best way to do this, I'm gonna say, is I'm not a fan of computers, but it's today's world. We have our webpage, the town of Litchfield. We have a little clipping, we can propose, and we can place this out there as something for everybody can refer it to. Okay, I'm learning about that page. Okay? I'm from the hammer and nail routine, okay?
Right. That newfangled thing, a computer.
At least I learned how to use an air gun, okay?
So,
And then the only thing I would just, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
so how would, so if we send this to public hearing for a future meeting, where, like, this is paper, it's not on the website, where would the interested parties get the draft?
I would send
could
it
have some
to, I
here,
would send it to Joan and we'd post it.
Yeah, I think
We'd
Joan
post it
would
on the web along with the notice for the hearing.
Right. I mean, certainly, I mean, this is fantastic. Thank you, Jay, for putting all the time and effort into
I
this. It's
think it's
wonderful.
wonderful.
So, I mean, a couple things. I mean, the board, obviously, if you want it to go to public hearing, you can certainly make a motion to go to public hearing. If you wanted to review it further on your own and come back, we can do that as well.
Right.
It's totally up to the board.
You
what the
got
board wants to
time
do.
not
We're
put
meeting
it
next
off.
week, aren't
I think you ought to,
Oh,
On the
not
19th.
tonight.
I say, let's say, we got elections, everything else coming up in the next month, probably next year. Take it, read it yourselves, understand it, and then the beginning of the year, we could have something when it's snow on the ground, where people are slow, okay? And go to the next step, because this is not an ordinance per se.
That's right, it's regulation.
It's just a regulation, so it's nothing you vote at the town meeting.
Right.
So we could certainly sit on it, have another work, and then at another workshop when everybody's
Yep.
had a chance to look at it, make a decision then.
Because, I mean, we received it tonight, obviously.
Exactly,
and,
you haven't had a chance to read it, so you.
So
may-
maybe the prudent thing to do would have the opportunity for the board to go through it at their leisure.
Yep.
We will come back, we'll reconvene on this, and then if we want to send it to a public hearing at some
Yeah.
point, we can send it to public.
And good chance I missed something. I really stopped wanting to read this, so.
But I think, I mean, it's very, from what I'm seeing, it looks like you really did a great job.
There'll be one posted in all the bathrooms in the town hall for those who sit there and read, okay?
Don't have time.
You can entertain that one. At deliberative, so.
You can take your iPad out instead, no.
You know, just a couple other
Yes.
minor things, I raised them before, but for a future workshop. But I think I did distribute to everybody the change in the definition of a butter.
Yeah.
We've got to change that in 3 places, so regulation zoning, it's not a big
It's a
deal.
state law change, correct?
State law change, the other state law change that we should address in our regulations, probably a couple of other things too. But, we can no longer require more than 1 parking space per unit for studio and 1-bedroom apartments in workforce housing or in any development with 10 units or more. So right now we require 2 parking spaces per unit, so we would have to make that change. We also have to allow for an alternative parking plan,
Yeah,
which is
because
vaguely defined and really wouldn't apply to us, but nevertheless, we have to have that. It's statutory language. We just need to stick it in
two
there.
people live in the same place, a husband and wife, or girlfriend, boyfriend, or whatever. They work at the same job? No way. That would ruin the relationship, but what I'm saying is that they gotta have both cars. Okay? It's typical, you're gonna have 2 cars no matter what.
Yeah, I think the logic here is not every unit is going to have 2 cars, and if there's a certain many units, once you average it out, there should be hopefully enough room for
The
all of it.
1-bedroom one,
Right. Yep. I mean, that's
that's a way of doing it.
the law. That's what we got to do.
Yep.
So we could do it, and we might as well, while we're at it, change the couple of things that came up last time, like if you have a garage, it has to be
Yes,
24
yeah,
feet wide?
right.
Why? Right, so.
So I think the
those are
next
minor,
time,
but-
I think that's what we'll focus on next time is the
Yeah, so I'll
parking
put those
piece,
together.
those two things, because we definitely had a
24-foot
discussion
wide
about that.
garage.
And I have a duplex change.
A duplex change.
We don't, at this time, say you have to have a common wall. We just had one on Page Road that basically had to be redesigned because it would have looked like two dwelling units on one lot. And Scott did a good job working with the landowner to try to get it down to be connected. So he found the International Building Code defines a duplex as a dwelling unit in a two-family dwelling that is separated from another dwelling unit by wall and/or floor assemblies with a 1-hour fire resistance rating. We don't have that now anywhere.
Yes, you do. It's in your building codes right now. That's been around for centuries. And it's also in the NFPA fire regulations.
But we don't say that they have to be connected.
No, if you're
duplexes.
saying, you're saying you want to put two separate dwelling units on a lot, which it would be.
As a duplex.
No, it won't be, because it's separated. Duplex is a single structure with two units,
Right,
where
right.
duplex comes from.
Right.
But if you got two separate, detached, single-family units, that's not a duplex.
And that's not allowed, two
Correct.
separate units on one lot, unless it's an ADU.
Unless it's an ADU. And then you can have the garage, whatever you want, but that's beside the point. What you're referring to is two separate dwellings that you would sell as a residence.
No, I'm referring to a duplex, that we don't say they have to have a common wall right
It can-
now.
Well, it does have, well, a duplex has a common wall in the code.
Well, the one that they were trying
Because
to
you have to have
build,
if it's attached by a foot,
they were trying
a firewall.
to attach by a breezeway.
it's a firewall still, because you gotta deal with that on both sides.
I'll let you argue with
Okay.
Scott.
I will argue that till I get old, because I've been enforcing that for 40 years.
The
It's in
one
the
on- the one on
regulation.
Juniper, the one on Juniper that was just a condoized, he said that, you're the one who said put the building together and put that firewall there.
Correct.
That one worked. It
Yeah.
looks like a big building, even though it's a duplex.
You got the firewall.
Right, well, we don't have that in the ordinance to say that you have to do that.
It's in,
We'll discuss.
it's in the building code, you have to do it.
Okay, we'll look.
And that's adopted by the town and the state.
Okay.
So for the definitions of a butter, is it possible for our regulations to just refer to New Hampshire regulations so that we don't?
You 100% could say, as defined by RSA, yeah, you could,
But I would refer to it in writing in it, so that people
yeah.
can read
Yeah.
it.
as amended, or as may be amended, yeah.
Or you might as well put the regulation in as it, so people know what it says.
But then the regulation changes and we have to scramble to change all of
Yeah.
our documents. to
That's just,
match
yeah,
that.
but in our case, all you do is bleep it. You change it with a new regulation. which is
But
what's gonna
still,
happen.
that's,
It's the exercise
that's
we're doing
staff
right
time,
now.
that's effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where if we just reference it and the state decides to change the RSA, our reference doesn't change, it's still the RSA.
We could certainly
You
do
could
that.
do it like that, correct.
And then make it available, it's
It's gotta be seen.
if you've looked at it, it's
Okay.
unfortunately
Yeah, it is.
challenging to figure out.
It was written by a lawyer.
I think so.
I know so, I've seen it. My God.
Like, it used to be
Yeah.
easy, street
Yeah, it used to
I
be
can
easy. It's
figure
not
that
easy
out.
anymore. No.
I tell you, it's all happened on upstairs there in Concord.
It's just like, and then there's one other really minor one,
Yeah.
and I don't know if we care, but they also amended state law to say that family daycare, the 6 or fewer, has to be allowed by right
Correct.
or conditional use in every community in New Hampshire. And I thought that was oddly specific, because it doesn't allow them, for example, by special exception, which I thought was weird. And we could let this lie if we want to, because I don't see it as a huge deal, but our home occupation approval is a little unusual.
Yeah.
In that it's a planning board approval and we have the regulations, and it's in the ordinance,
Is
but we
it-
actually don't say what it is. It's not a site plan,
Nope.
it's not a conditional use,
It's home
so.
occupation.
Right, but what is the nature of that approval? I don't know.
Based off the way the regulation is written, is only is, if it meets the criteria of the regulation, it's approval.
Right, but most things are a site plan, a subdivision,
Except for that.
a conditional use. They're a thing,
So you're referring
an
to,
innovative land use. There's something.
so
that
you could
can-
say allowable uses in a residential zone or any other zone. The way the statute reads is you got 6 or less, you don't need to get a approval, but you're gonna get a license.
You do, but right now, what we say is it's in our home occupation ordinance.
That's because back in the day, that's the way it used to be.
I know, I'm just saying.
You're bringing this
that
into
now
the
that the
20th
law
century.
has changed.
That's what we gotta do.
We might want to think about,
Yep.
so one option, and I don't know that it's a high priority, is to simply, for home occupation approval, just
Amend it.
call it conditional use, and then we're done. The criteria is all there, it's just
Okay.
terminology.
That's a simple way of doing it.
It's a really, really simple
I
change.
wouldn't call it site plan, because that'd be
No.
too burdensome.
I wouldn't either, it's
No.
just, but, you know, we wouldn't have to change anything.
Just
It's
meets the
just-
criteria.
Yeah,
And
just
then
that
it's
little-
clear, and it probably is just clear for everybody what a home because there sometimes has been this kind of ambiguity as to
What, yeah,
what exactly is it
right.
that we've approved, so.
Daycares for years in a residential zone had to go through, most towns had to go through a special exception procedure. Okay, I know I put many of them through there and they went through, but they weren't limiting themselves to 6 kids, 99% of them. Okay? If it's over, if it's a certain amount, okay, they just said, most occupants that come in, they like to get 10 or 12 in there, and it's a day-type operation. And they gotta have the space, because I even inspected many of them. And you gotta have the area, and the fire department comes in and make sure everything's placed too.
Yep.
Okay, it's not just a renovation, you just gotta go in and look to see if it meets the criteria for the loads and everything else.
Does that include like septic and stuff like that as well?
Subsurface too is part of the discussion. Most cases, you get 6 kids in a house, you don't really have a septic problem. They're very limited to that, you know, there's very low water usage with that amount.
Diaper disposal problems.
Your dumpster gets fuller, and the people don't like to walk by it when you set it out next to the road. Okay?
We haven't had one come in, so.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, I think that would be something we can definitely,
Yeah,
that's a
just an
minor
easy
change,
fix.
I think
If
that
it
we
was
could.
over 6, would they still be a conditional use, or would it?
You would have to go through
back to our
another set of
language.
rules and regulations with the state as well.
Yeah, I don't remember what we said. I think we said 6, but I could double check.
I believe it was 6, but I remember seeing that a lot longer. I still try to keep up the par.
You better stop having grandkids, you'll be needing a conditional use
That's
permit.
free, and they keep me busy. 10-month-old, 6-month-old, and a 7-year-old.
So that's all I got.
Okay, well, thank you, Jay, appreciate it, we'll definitely revisit that, and, I think next time we'll focus on the parking in the garage.
Yep.
We also haven't
easy.
discussed the options for the northern commercial.
Yes, that's
Yes.
true, yeah.
So we've got that, and I can circulate that language
Yeah,
again.
we should go revisit that, yeah, definitely.
And if we do decide that we want to go into that direction, we want to put that forward this year, then we could also start looking at some tweaks to our regulations to address it also. I thought about adding more requirements that would get us kind of closer to what we were looking at when we kind of went through what's a mixed-use village, but at the same time recognizing, well, it's an ordinance, you don't want to start getting too specific in an ordinance about design issues, you really should do that in your regulations, so.
What would belong in the ordinance in this situation?
I think it's the basic framework. It's what you're allowed, what the density is, what the uses are, and things like the minimum open space, but not necessarily getting into
Design
how are
criteria.
you laying out that
Design criteria.
you know, open space. I thought about some of the things that we thought about internally, position, but again, kind of how you're siting the buildings and things like that, that's probably better in your regulation. Because it's just gonna vary, and it's, you know, once you put it in the ordinance, now the only way you can change it is the ZBA, and you probably don't want that, so. But, I mean, we can all review the language, and we can see if there's
Design
more things that we
criteria
wanna change.
is different than the ordinance to allow it.
Typically, yeah, so, but if we do decide we wanna put it forward for March, we know, okay, between now and when it's
Gotta have
adopted,
something.
we should look, you know, address our regulations.
So one of the proposed requirements that was the language you sent out, the ordinance wording?
Yes.
So one of the requirements was the study for the economic, like, viability.
And that's in the ordinance.
Like one additional, like, here's another thing that I'm curious if it would be in the regulation or the ordinance. Like it might make sense for us to, like, it might benefit those types of developments if the commercial use complements the residential use. Like
Architectural.
commercial uses that are likely to be used by residents of that development. Like, for example, not a contractor's building.
Right, so some of that we did put in the ordinance, but some of it we didn't. So again, I'd say take a look at that ordinance language, think about whether you want more definition around that. And we absolutely can do that. Some of that, again, I think would be something you'd want to put into the regulations more than the ordinance, just because you want to start to think about how specific are you gonna really be? And also, we want to make sure that part of the reason for the commercial use is to have that mixed-use village feel. Part of it is also to have that net positive, outcome, impact. And so you also just want to make sure we're not so limiting the commercial uses that we're allowing that you're going to defeat the purpose because they're not going to happen. So that's always that kind of balance. But I'd say absolutely take a look at what's in there. Some things we did say you can't have, like a gas station. We said that specifically. We didn't want auto-oriented uses. But that, that's a decision.
I'm never gonna get a Dunkin' Donuts thing.
Not with a drive-through in this right? But again, those are some of those. I think it's the higher level things that are in the ordinance, and then it's the details that you want to put in your regs. And it's going to vary, right, on the size, because some developments on the smaller end of the scale you're going to be really challenged to say this 10-unit development is going to support the commercial development. A bigger development could support a whole lot more. So like off the top of my head, if it were Corning Farms, say, that would be about a 6,000 square foot minimum commercial building or buildings. That's multiple tenants probably in a Litchfield context. So that's going to be a little bit different. So those are absolutely those are the kinds of things we want to think about.
Yeah, the proposed language I would want probably would be that at least one of the proposed commercial uses must be like beneficial or potentially used or utilized by residents. So like not everyone needs to be, but I think one of them should, so that.
Yeah, you can't, I see what you're saying, but commercial uses, many of them, they're businesses that may have scope on their type of vendor that's different. And not everybody will go to that, but somebody will go to it.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, I know what you're saying though, but it's difficult to do that.
But this is a mixed-use village proposal, so.
Yep.
For them to be close together, it helps when the residential use supports the commercial use. Otherwise, just put the commercial in.
Absolutely, yeah, I know. I mean, I agree. And there's a lot of things I think I'd want to see, at very least in the regulations, if not the ordinance. Restrictions on parking and how it's placed.
That's regulations, that's site plan, right?
But as I started to think about it, the more I thought about where do I put this, But again, that's something we could discuss at our next work session. So we'll circulate all that language again for everybody to take a look at and see
Sounds
where we
good.
want to go.
Okay.
And it is 6, maximum of 6.
Maximum, okay.
Right, not including children who reside in them.
Correct. That's the way I used to do it all the time.
Thank you.
You want to schedule the next work session?
Yes, why don't we do that?
Do we have anything?
Don't say next Tuesday.
Do we have anything?
ADU coming in.
Just an ADU?
If he makes it by, it actually should have been today.
So we could do the 19th?
Yeah.
The 19th of November. Okay,
Is that a Tuesday?
I think so.
Yeah, so during that meeting, we'll have a chance to review the
The ADU.
the stormwater regulations. And do you think we'll address the other topics like the abutter definitions and all that on that meeting?
We'll put it all together for that packet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you put me my email address, Joe, can give it to you so I can get it? Because I know you send it out to everybody.
You're on the, you have the
Planning
planning
board.
board? Yeah.
I haven't even got the last one. I don't get it. Well,
Well, most of the materials are just on the website.
On the portal, yeah.
So you go to
Well, Jay can't
planning.
get to the portal, so if he sends it.
I sent it to you.
Yeah,
Send it to me.
planning.
But I just sent something to everybody in the planning. Check your email
I'll
because
swing by to
I
get.
just sent something on
historic.
historic districts to everybody tonight. So
I'll swing by to
Well,
pick
we'll
up
make
the
sure you
paper.
get a hard copy.
Drop it in your mailbox. Check your mailbox.
Okay,
I got a key to your door.
Yeah, never find it there.
so moving on to committee reports. Any reports from any committees?
You went to one, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to the CIP the other night,
Did you go to Limerlac?
and I went to the Lower Merrimack Local
Do you have an
Advisory
address
Committee.
for them?
Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. They actually have a new website that they just put up.
Oh.
Um,
Damn.
and I saw the email, I think it came out yesterday. And so there's a brand new site for the Rivers Advisory Boards.
Oh.
And I can forward that to you, Joan
Good.
and Jay. But I guess it's a brand new site and they're gonna be using it, so.
good.
Take a look at that. Conservation is meeting when, Joan?
The 7th,
7th
at the fire station.
at the fire station at 6:30. Okay. Jeremy is not here.
Economic Development Committee meets
Did
tomorrow
you
night.
want to speak to that, Jay? Are you on that?
Yeah, so they're meeting to go over the focus group, the input from the focus group, the last focus group.
Okay.
So that'll be happening tomorrow night, 6:30. I can't remember if we're here at the fire station.
The Energy Committee's meeting tonight at the fire station.
And NRPC, any updates?
The 20th. will be
20th?
Another commission.
Commission meeting? Okay. Kevin, anything for the Board of Selectmen?
Not yet. I'll
Okay.
find something if you want it.
All right, well,
I don't think we have anything going on right now other than the everyday politics.
approval of the October 15th, 2024 minutes.
Oh, wait, one more thing. The
Oh, yeah.
CIP, isn't trying to be a hearing on December 5th? No, because Kim just gave me these dates on
No,
the
the
CIP.
meeting, I think that we had to push out the
It's meeting on a Friday.
meeting to November 21st
9th?
or something. I have to double check that, but
Meeting
don't
was
quote
just
me.
changed, I remember that.
Oh, it's just because I think maybe the 3rd, she was saying that we should have a public hearing on the CIP? Is that?
Town calendar shows 4 PM meeting on the 22nd,
For who, CIP?
CIP.
Yeah.
Yes.
November 22nd.
I knew it was a Friday.
The
'cause I'm like,
reason,
really?
the reason for that had to do with the school, because the school is still working on, I don't know, deciding whether they want to put stuff on the plan. And plus the new survey for the Facilities Improvement Committee is gonna come out, and they need to review it, so we gave them an opportunity to do that, and so we pushed it out. Because originally it was gonna be November 4th, but.
Right.
I'll check with her again about the hearing. Okay. Okay, thank you.
No problem. October 15th minutes. Did anyone have an opportunity to take a look at those? Have any questions and concerns?
Where were they?
I was gonna say, I looked
No.
in the portal.
Oh,
they're
that's
not
right, you
there.
didn't get a portal.
And
so
we
you-
didn't get a portal, so I guess we'll table those minutes
Welcome to my
till the
world,
next
people.
meeting.
I just,
All I have is that skimpy agenda and I forgot.
Okay, so they're not,
You don't get anything.
right?
yeah, I looked online and they are on the agendas section of the Litchfield, New Hampshire's main website,
Okay.
Sorry.
but I have not
On
had
the
a chance to
agenda
review
section or the
those.
minutes section?
The combined
Oh.
minutes and agendas
You
section.
have to go through all the dates to that thing coming down,
Then you have to find the planning
On
section.
the portal or the,
town thing.
no?
Yeah, and you look at the agenda.
Scroll,
and I get selectmen, you go down, you get-
scroll. It's there somewhere. Oh, my God.
So
You have to, I think
Did you
do
find
that.
it?
You do
Yeah.
that.
we will, what we'll do is we'll table those to the next meeting.
Thank you.
There it is.
Opportunity for everyone to
Right
look at
there,
those.
that little checkbox under minutes.
That little checkbox.
Yep, that's it.
No wonder Kevin
So
couldn't find
you
it.
found them.
Wow.
There you go.
Any other business? Joan, do you have anything? Jay, do you have anything?
Do not?
Anybody have anything?
Except you know what you're doing next Tuesday, right? Voting.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Say hi to me when you go by.
Wait, just an election?
That's right.
Yeah.
This 4 years ago. Do I have to do
So,
it again?
get out and vote. That's the message.
I don't wanna stay, I hope the weather is not as good as it's gonna be.
That's not gonna stop him from this election.
Well, if anybody doesn't have anything else for this evening, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Well, no one made the motion.
Second motion, we adjourn then.
We have a second?
I got a second too, if you want it.
I'll second that.
All right, we'll second, but thank you.
I'm proud of you.
All right.
Fail for lack of a second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, abstain. Motion passes.
Last night's meeting was a little longer than this meeting.
7-0-0.
Say was.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Get out and vote on November 5th, and we will see you.
You're not gonna let me keep down.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
That's what you're doing. You're not gonna let me
You can go
keep
home
down.
now.
And then it's gonna be up to me to have somebody to go to the CBA or myself.
I hope I wasn't too
It's not clear.